Is this an email? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we'll start off with these two questions. Question number one. I heard that this time period is a sad time period in the Jewish calendar. Can you explain why and what the customs are of what we should do and what we should not do? So let me just refine that statement. This time period that we're in between Passover and Shavuot is a sad time period, but it's not that sad. I would rather call it a solemn time period in which we have to engage in contemplation, meditation, and reflection. Why so? Well, this time period really represents two massive ideas. One idea is this idea that there are 24,000 Jewish students who died during this time period. Those were the students of the legendary Rabbi Akiva of 2,000 years ago. And unfortunately, they all died just this very short time period up until Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer, from Passover until then, by a plague. What type of plague? The Talmud says it was croup. Today, thank God, you can recover from croup. I guess back in the day, you could not. Now, when the Talmudic sages try to grapple with this idea of why would they die, not that anyone can understand death, as we've so often said, sometimes the finite brain cannot understand the infinite being. But still, there are lessons we can learn from everything in life. So what lesson can we learn from this plague that took the lives of 24,000 students? And the Talmud says, which means that these students did not respect one another. So the lesson we ought to learn is that we ought to respect one another. Now, I want to, before we go to idea number two, that is also represented by this time period, I just want to delve into this a little bit more because it's interesting. Those were the students, as mentioned, of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is mainly known for teaching that the most important mitzvah in the entire Torah is to love your fellow as yourself, which is, by the way, in this week's coming portion, Leviticus 19:18. You should love your fellow as yourself. That's the most important mitzvah in the entire Torah. That's the greatest rule of the Torah, as in his words. So how could his own students not show respect? I mean, you would expect maybe other students, maybe not to show respect, but you are the students of Rabbi Akiva who taught that to love your fellow is the most important. Why couldn't you even follow his basic teaching? And I think the answer is because what he taught, what Rabbi Akiva taught, was that loving, and the focus is on loving your fellow as yourself is the most important rule. Not respecting, loving. What did they not do? Respect each other. If you think about this, love and respect are really two very different emotions. When I love someone, I want to come close to them, I want to hug them, kiss them. When I respect someone, I keep my distance a little bit. Now, more than that, love relates to that which we have in common with the other. I love sports, you love sports, great, let's go to a Cardinals game, even though they suck. Or let's go to another sports game. I love good food, you love good food, let's go to a good restaurant. Fine. So there's a love there that relates to that which we have in common, that binds us together. Respect relates to that which we do not have in common with one another. I don't understand why you have this habit, but I respect it. Why do you brush your teeth this way? I respect that. I don't understand why. Why do you like the color green? I don't know, but I respect that. Why do you like to engage in this hobby? I don't know, but I respect that. It's things that we cannot understand that evoke this emotion of respect. Now, the students of Rabbi Akiva, again, did not respect each other, perhaps because they listened to their rabbi too much. The rabbi said that to love is the most important. To love your fellows yourself is the most important. When you love too much, you know what happens? You have zero boundaries. You invade the other person's space. And when that occurs, and respect is thrown out the window, and then you suffocate the other with love. And that's why every healthy relationship really needs to have a very good balance between love, in other words, to know when to come close, but also respect. to know when to keep my distance. It's this tango dance. Sometimes I have to come close. Sometimes the person needs his space, needs his quiet time, as they call it. And that's when I have to know how to back off. Sometimes there are issues I should not express my opinion on. The way you dress, that's your thing. I have no understanding. The color pink that I don't know, but that's fine. Whatever it may be, those things that I cannot understand. Maybe it's not my role here to love and to come close and to try to understand it. But maybe this is also why the Talmud says that the ultimate spousal relationship is when I can love my spouse just like I love myself, but I respect my spouse more than I respect myself. Emphasizing this idea that respect is perhaps even more important than love. Now, by the way, you want to translate this to our day and age, in Hollywood, you have a lot of love, ton of love. You see all these couples all madly in love with each other, but most of them end up in divorce. And you ask yourself, why? Maybe because there was a lot of love, but zero respect, right? While relationships that want to thrive and want to last are relationships that need that element of respect so badly. So that's what we are working on during this time period. As we commemorate the passing of the students of Rabbi Akiva, we have to have that in mind, that reflection in mind, that meditation in mind. That's one big idea. Yes, Janet.
There's like a shop, and then couples that just meet and get to know one another, basically, as opposed to just gravitating towards each other, fall in love. The meeting, finding out who they are.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's the genius behind matchmaking. Not that, other types of relationships can't work. There's exceptions to every rule, but it's certainly the wisdom behind it, because what matchmaking does is that it tells both sides ahead of time. These are the things you'll love. These are the things you may not love, but you may have to respect. And then the person can make the decision, well, these things that I love are great, but the things that I have to respect, that's not for me. I can respect the person that loves the color pink, even though I don't, but I can't respect the person that loves this type of music or whatever else is important for that person, right? So I think that extracts all potential not all, but many potential conflicts from the get-go. That's correct, yeah. Now, speaking of this plague, and this is why maybe the question here was whether this is a sad time period in the Jewish calendar, because we are, again, commemorating this plague and, of course, learning from it, as we just said, the lesson of respect. We have some mourning customs to mourn those deaths. Some of those customs are that one should not get married during this time period. You can get engaged during this time period, but you can't get married during this time period. That's a celebration of tremendous happiness. One, for example, should avoid buying or at least wearing new clothes during this time period, because also that increases happiness. Now, there are ways to go about it. For example, Shabbat is not included. Shabbat's holiness and happiness far supersedes these mourning customs. So if you buy something new, you can wear it on Shabbat, and then on Sunday, it won't be new anymore. So you can continue wearing it. The other customs include, for example, not going to live concerts. Some don't go because that, again, increases happiness. Music maybe in your car, that might be okay, but live events like that, then no. So there are customs that at least strive to minimize one's happiness so that we can be in a more reflective and meditative mode on mourning those 24,000 students. That's why maybe this question. Okay, so that was one big idea. Another big idea, going back to this time period, and then we'll go to question 2, and then we'll open this up, is that the time period that we're in between Passover and Shavuot is a period in which we are counting days, which is a fascinating mitzvah. Every single day we are counting the Omer, basically counting 49 days until the festival of Shavuot. Some say the most basic reason is to show excitement that on Shavuot, the festival of Shavuot is the day in which we receive the Torah. So to show excitement that, oh, great, we're going to be receiving the Torah and the 10 Commandments again. So let's count those days just as we will count, my kids right now are counting the days until summer vacation, to something great, right? So you count those days. But there's a deeper reason here, and that is because Passover really is the festival in which we became free. But how do you really become free? Because taking a slave out of bondage does not necessarily make him free. Just as taking a prisoner out of prison doesn't necessarily make him free. In fact, if you look at the statistics, most prisoners who were in prison for over 5 years go back to prison. Because you could take a prisoner out of prison, but you can't take the prison out of a prisoner who's been there for a long time. They've developed a mentality of prisoners, and they're comfortable with prison, so they go back. So how do you really become truly free? It's not enough to take the Jew out of Egypt. You have to take Egypt out of the Jew. How do you do that? And God is telling us the first method is by telling that slave that you have to value time. Really, one of the great differences, think about this, between people who are quote unquote successful and people who are not, is that the people who are value time tremendously. Every minute for them counts. And they know exactly how to plan their times in an effective and productive way. So that's why we count days, so that we can value time and make the best out of the time that is given to us. You know, I've always despised that expression. I don't want to take much of your time, or I appreciate your time. Your time, your time. Our time is not ours. You know, I know that because if my time was mine, I would choose to live to the age of at least 1,000 if I can designate time, if it's mine. But I don't. I can't. My time is not, it's time that was given to me by God. It's not my time. You can say, I appreciate God's time that was given to you, but not your time. And in many ways, because it's not our time, we have to use it carefully. Because the time that we have today, we might not have tomorrow. So we're going to allow all these minutes, all these hours to just go by, or we're going to squander it in such a, such a useless way. They say that to value a minute, do you know that expression? Remember that? To value just 1 minute, go to the person who just missed his train. To value 1 second, what is it? To value 1 second, go to the person who just avoided a car accident. And to value a millisecond, go to the person who just received a silver medal in the Olympics. That will teach you the value of time. And in many ways, that's what God tries to do. And that's the difference between being a slave and being a free person. Free person knows the value of time and therefore knows how to use it best. And I want to attach this maybe to a midrash that we may have spoken about in the past, but it's a midrash that I carry with me. It's a midrash that speaks about how the Bible says that a person's days is like a fleeting shadow. Yameinu ketzel over. Now, what does it mean? Like a fleeting shadow. There are 3 types of shadows, says the midrash: a bird shadow, a wall shadow, and a tree shadow. A bird shadow is a shadow that really doesn't exist. 1 second it's here, the other second it's there, it's not there. Some people don't leave an impact in this world. They don't know how to use their time productively, effectively, impactfully, and therefore they are born, and then when they die, you realize, gosh, 0 impact. It's almost like they haven't even lived. Then you have a wall shadow. When does the wall create a shadow? A wall. When does the wall create a shadow? Either early in the morning, when the sun is shining to the east or west. Shining to the west, coming from the east. Or in the evening, opposite direction. That's when the wall creates a shadow. But in the middle of the day, it doesn't, because the sun is on top of it. It doesn't create any shadow. Same with some people. They bring a lot of happiness to their family when they are born, and then they kind of disappear. They're all engrossed in themselves. What can I obtain in life? What can you do for me? And then towards the end of their lives, they realize, gosh, we're about to die and we don't leave any impact. So then they start becoming givers in all sorts of ways, not just money-wise, obviously, but with their time, God's time that was given to them, or with their resources. So that's another type of shadow, and that's another way to use your time. You've used your time well at the beginning of your life and at the end of your life if you're like a wall. But the shadow of a tree exists all the time, right? It's in the morning, in the middle of the day, and in the evening. Just like some people who realize that the time that is given to them should be used in order to make an impact. And therefore, they create a shadow all the time. They are like those trees. This is also why King David compares the righteous to trees, not just because they produce fruits, but because of their shadow that is everlasting, always there. So that's one massive idea that we have to draw from this time period. Beyond the mourning and the idea of respect, we also have to learn how to value time. This is also why Kabbalists have incorporated a different quality, different attribute that every person has to work on during this time period. They are based on the 7 Kabbalistic attributes or 7 root emotions that every human being has. And every single day we work on a different emotion to know how to channel it in the best of ways so that our time again can be as effective as possible. Anyway, so that's to relate. It's a long answer to that short question. Question number 2. Yes, please. Yes. Yes, please. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Very much so, yes, you're right. In fact, you know that there's even a Jewish law that says that every cemetery has to have trees. So if you go to Jewish cemeteries, you'll see a lot of trees. It'll be less in Arizona because trees don't grow so well here, but you still have trees, like at the Mount Sinai Cemetery here. But exactly, to represent just that their impact is everlasting, just like the shadow of a tree, just like the fruits of a tree. If you go to Psalm chapter 1, the very beginning of King David's book of Psalms, it compares the righteous as a tree that grows by the riverside. It gives its fruit in time and it creates a shadow again that's everlasting. So that's right. It's a good point. Yeah, we're big into trees in Judaism. By the way, I mean, we can talk about trees forever, but to the point that if an army, let's say right now, the Israeli army is going into Gaza, into Rafah at least, an Israeli Jewish army is not allowed to cut off trees unless it really, really will delay or prevent their ways of victory. But one cannot just cut a tree. I know that here in Arizona, there's a law against cutting off cactuses, right? Well, in Judaism, it's not just against cactuses. It's against every type of tree. You can't just cut off a tree. There's, of course, the simpler reason, because trees are so crucial to our planet, but also because they symbolize all that is good in the human being. We are compared to trees. In Deuteronomy, God tells us, Ki Adam etz hasadeh, man is like the tree of the field. Anyway, so we can go into trees if you want, but those are some big ideas. Okay. Let's go to question 2, and then I'll open this up. Can you please explain the reason and history of the tradition to say L'chaim? And why do some click their glasses as they do so? So it's a good question. The biblical reason is because wine in the Torah is associated with bad events. First, let's start with Adam. Adam and Eve ate from the forbidden tree. That was the tree of what? So some say it was an apple, but that's probably completely wrong. Some say it was a fig tree. Bless you. Some say it was a fig tree. Talmud says it was a fig tree. Talmud also says it was a vineyard. Grapes. And so there's the first association between grapes / wine and a bad event. Another more clear event that was really bad was when Noah comes out of his ark after the flood. Remember that? What does he do? First thing he does, he plants a vineyard. And then what does he do? That's right. He drinks from the wine that he makes out of this vineyard. He becomes drunk, and his kids found him lying naked on the ground. Remember that biblical story? So again, another bad event that is associated with wine. And therefore, in Judaism, when we drink wine or alcohol, we say l'chaim, that this event with wine that we're having right now should not be a negative one like the Torah, but it should be a positive one to life. Should be celebrating life, joy in life, all that is good in life. That's reason one. Another reason is because wine, as the Talmud states, has the ability to extract the deeper secrets from a human being. When a person becomes drunk, that's when you get to the, that's right. As they say, Nichnas yain, the Talmud says, Nichnas yain yotzeh sod. When wine comes in, secrets come out. So before you start drinking, we say, we hope that those secrets will be life-oriented, will be joy-oriented, and not, God forbid, the other way. Some people become drunk and they start becoming negative and violent sometimes also. So let this drinking be for life. That's another reason. Why do they click their glasses to do so? That's really, it's not a Jewish idea, but it's a historical idea, which probably comes from the Middle Ages. And that is that's when they introduced the clicking of the glasses when we say l'chaim, because some people would poison one another. When they would come, they would trick their enemies into come, let's have a meal together, let's drink together. And then what they would do is put some poison in their wines. So then they developed a custom, this is true, you can Google it, that they would pour some of the wine that they had in their cups into each other's cup. So if you poison me, well, it's going to you. And if you poison me, it's coming to me. And that's where the clicking of the glasses then came about. It stopped being just the pouring, but at least the clicking still existed. That's why you click. One last idea about wine, and that is, or saying l'chaim altogether. I just want to add that many Hasidic Jews not only say l'chaim, but they say l'chaim velivracha, which means to life and to blessing. And that is because wine can, in many ways, silence a person or retrieve him from society. When I'm drunk, just leave me alone, or I have a headache, let me go to sleep. And yeah, we say l'chaim v'livracha, no. Don't use that wine in order to retrieve yourself. Use that wine so that you can engage yourself even more and become a blessing to society. This wine, and that's why Hasidim do that or say that all the time, because very often they would drink wine or alcohol in the context of what we call farbrengens, which are Hasidic gatherings. And Hasidic gatherings, the point of a Hasidic gathering is to take upon oneself good resolutions. And therefore, when we say l'chaim, we are saying, remember, this gathering is not just for us and then to retrieve ourselves. It's the opposite. It's for us to increase our life and to increase the blessing that we are to the world. So therefore, they say l'chaim v'livracha. Again, it's a sign of reminder that this gathering now should not cause a divorce from society, but a re-engagement in society with blessings and with life. So that's the idea behind l'chaim. That's it. Those are the questions for today, but we can open up to, yes, please. Please. Right. Well, the what ifs question are usually questions that I don't really think can be addressed. And that is because no one will ever know, right? But I will pose it from a different direction. What if I don't believe in that? And that's the way I live life. But I'm going to go even further. What if I don't believe in God? Is the life of an atheist a life worth living? as opposed to a life of a believer. And I'm going to go in that direction, particularly to make a point that the life of a believer is a life that's more worth living than the life of an atheist. And the reason for that, by the way, science backs me in this. And the reason for that is because if I believe in God, then there are two things that the atheist doesn't have. One is accountability. Accountable. I can't just do whatever I want. How do I know that science backs me? Because, for example, students cheat less in bright rooms than they cheat in dark rooms. You know why? Because in bright rooms, they can see, people can see them, can be supervised. In dark rooms, they can't, so they cheat. So they give in to their inclinations. People who believe in God know that there's a God watching them. Therefore, they can't just do anything. And do not steal really means do not steal. And do not murder really means doesn't matter how strong the inclination is. I'll give you another example. And they're studies, but I'm going to go a different direction. I'll give you another example. The example is of you, imagine yourself walking down a very dark alley, very late at night. And you're all by yourself. All of a sudden, three massive giants with tattoos and muscular come towards you. What's your initial reaction? Fear, right? And then someone comes and whispers in your ear, by the way, those three people just came out of a 3-hour Bible class. What happens then? Your fear in many ways starts to go away because you know that they're accountable. So that's accountability is one. Number two, there's a sense of purpose that is much greater in believers than in non-believers. And people who do believe that God is omnipotent or not. And that is because, right. Just like yesterday. Yeah. Omniscient means that, I just want to define omniscient. And that is that God supervises everything, that he's constantly engaged in creation, right? So just to finish the point, I think that in many ways is very much connected to the sense of purpose. If I am living in order to partner with God in creation and to make this world a better place, then I have this divine sense of purpose. But if I have no God in the picture, of no partnering, then what's the point? I'm just a calculation of some DNA and cellular forces. So that's that. But the omniscient part, I also want to say that I think it comes from this idea that God is not just like any CEO, which is the biggest mistake we make. And I see that with Hebrew schools, that we portray God as this big CEO who's in charge of this world, or sometimes as an old man with a big white beard, right? You've seen that portrait of God who supervises everything. No, God is not like the CEO, because that CEO, as powerful or as Jeff Bezos he may be, is still very limited. And therefore, he needs 20,000 secretaries and people to carry out his vision, because he can't do it all. But God is not limited. God is infinite. And if God is infinite, that means that he can be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. That also means that the child's smile is just as important to him as $5 billion business deal. With infinity, everything equalizes. And I think that's why when we believe that God is infinite, then we can also recognize that he is involved in creation with the slightest details of creation. It's a good question, though. Yeah. Yes.
A non-believer, an atheist, I think would counter that with saying, well, my mission is to be a good person and not to be. What do you say to that?
I say to that person, define good. Because that's another issue. I think that, and that's the issue we see with the youth a lot. People say, well, I'm a good person, or I follow my heart and I'm good. I think the problem is that good can change if it's defined by the human brain. You know what the extreme example is for that? Nazis. Nazis were good people. And they were the best philosophers, by the way, of that time. But they convinced themselves, their human brain convinced themselves that at one point that good means to kill Jews. Right. Well, if I'm a believer, good is not dependent on how I define good. It's dependent on how God defines good, and that never changes. And therefore, do not murder is not murder. Whether I think that killing a Jew is a good thing for society or not, it's still do not murder. That doesn't change. And I think that's the argument I would pose. Yes, Geraldine. So I'm against generalizations altogether. So the Haredi really refers to the ultra-Orthodox, but there are many, many groups within that ultra-Orthodox bucket of Haredi. Some of them, you're right, are anti-Israel or anti-Zionism. That's a good question. I can't answer for them. All I can... So there are those who are very extreme called the Neturei Karta sect, which I don't believe are Jewish because what they do is just despicable. They participate in pro-Palestinian rallies. They burn Israeli flags. They are as anti-Jewish as it gets. No, sorry. Why? Well, they call themselves ultra-Orthodox. So what? I can call myself a frog. Am I a frog? Doesn't mean anything. But I will say this. I think that it's rooted. By the way, it's an offshoot of the Satmar Chassidim, who are also quite extreme. Satmar. And again, it's not the entire Haredi population. Many are very pro-Israel and send their kids to the army, etc. But it's really rooted in this idea that the founders of the state of Israel, the modern state of Israel as we know it, were secular Jews. And they therefore opposed the foundation of such a state because they said that these Jews who are quote unquote secular will destroy any traditional aspect of Judaism through the legalities of the state. And they opposed the state of Israel then as they oppose the state of Israel today, based on this. The Neturei Karta, very small. I would say there's about 500 families from what numbers I'm receiving. I will tell you that many of these Neturei Karta Hasidim have been excommunicated even by the Haredis. So many of them come from London. There are some in Brooklyn. But for example, they are not accepted in Jewish schools. They are not accepted in, counted in synagogues. They're not allowed to walk into synagogues in many places. So they've been excommunicated, which is comforting. No, that's a different discussion. No, these Neturei Karta are crazy, even, I wouldn't even say, yeah, despicable people. By the way, you have into both extremes. We talk about Neturei Karta, we don't talk about the George Soroses of the world. So let's not forget that too. But the George Soroses of the world. But yeah, but I will say that there is right now, just to relate to your question, there is right now a big tension in Israel, regarding many of these very religious Jews and their army service. Many of them don't want to go to the army. Some of them do, but they want to have many conditions met, which is more understandable. So that's already a very complicated political issue, which is, up to Israel to... I think it should go, yes, but I agree that sometimes there should be conditions made. Yeah, but my son is in the army, so of course I agree. Yeah.
In Israel?
Yeah. It's yours, yes, no?
During wartime.
Well, wartime, yeah. So on the regular day, they observe Shabbat, and the army is very accommodating. During wartime, you don't have to observe Shabbat according to Jewish law. Life comes first. You're fighting for your life, for the life of others, for the life of Jews everywhere on the planet. So that comes first. Not only do you, Yom Kippur, you don't have to fast. Even on Yom Kippur, you break every law because, yeah, life comes first. Yes.
So I'm aware that anti-Semitism has always existed. And
Right.
Probably always continue to exist that way. However, I find what's happening in this world so upsetting. So like to the core, deeply upsetting. And how do you see this? Do you see this play out? Like, do you see this getting a little better? Do you see this still getting worse? I know you can't.
Yeah, I can't predict the future. And I also am not wise enough, I think, to accurately analyze the situation. But I am an optimist. I'm an optimist because of two reasons. One, usually when a storm happens, you see the trees that are healthy and the trees that are not healthy. And very often, I think it's true with any type of crisis in the world. Then you see who's on your side, who's not. Usually the trees that are healthy are the ones that sustain the storms. Please God, therefore our trees will sustain the storm too. So it creates some type of clarity that eventually also creates some time of order in the world. But number two, I just want to add a biblical side to this, and that is we believe in the coming of Mashiach. We believe in the Messianic era. And we also believe that we're very, very, very close to it. And I'm not the one saying that. Many of our Jewish leaders have said this now for the past 4 decades, 5 decades, from the Lubavitcher Rebbe to the Baba Sali, to you name it, that we're really at the doorstep. Mashiach is coming any second, maybe even now. From this class, we'll go straight to Jerusalem. So from that standpoint alone, I'm very optimistic too. Yeah.
But then there are those, there are those that are Jews, like the people you just mentioned earlier, and some of the you see on campuses, the students, the Jewish student or
Right, JSP. Right.
And they're having their Seder in the middle of the encampment, and of course that's what the media focuses on.
Sure, yeah.
And so those are Jews, and how could the Mashiach come if they're not behaving properly?
Yeah.
Be a good Jew before the Mashiach comes.
Yeah, I don't blame them. I really blame their parents and their grandparents. And I'll tell you why. Because this is a bigger conversation. But I think we've failed our youth in many ways. How so? By not giving them a sense of purpose, a why, a reason to live that's greater than just existing, than just amassing stuff and wealth, and a reason, a why, a cause, I would say. And the soul will always search for one. And if you won't give him a proper cause, then that soul will find terrible causes. And I think that the summation of what we're seeing, in part, is mainly because all these kids are just searching for a purpose. And they were never given one. They don't even know, but let's do something greater than myself. Now this is given to them. What do they know from TikTok? So they'll choose it. This is what's available to them. That's what's accessible.